Hi, Asher, Carla, Eric, Lydia, Jeremiah, Trey, Sarah, Jack. How are you guys? Hopefully you're sitting and watching this video with your mommy. I just wanted to cover a few definitions that I did not get to cover in depth in class. So grab your notebooks and we're about to begin. Now in class, you may have remembered me speaking about structures and patterns and purposes of a sentence. But unfortunately during class, I did not go in depth as to how this pertains to a sentence. Duh, that's why we're there, right? So today I would like to just go over just a quick overview of what a structure of a sentence looks like as it pertains to an actual sentence. So look with me on the board. Now we spoke about 4 structures of a sentence. There are 4 structures. But before I tell you these 4 structures, let's speak about this word that you're going to keep hearing me say over and over. This word is the word clauses or clause. What exactly is a clause? So I'll make it singular. What exactly is a clause? A clause is a group of words that contain a subject and a verb. So if you ever hear this word clause, just think it's a group of words that contain a subject and a verb. For example, I'll use the example from the book. Jesus wept. If you notice, Jesus begins our sentence. Who wept? Jesus. So Jesus would be our subject, and Jesus is a noun. What is being said about Jesus? He wept. So wept is the verb. So we just created a clause because we have a subject and a verb. So just keep that in the back of your mind, as clause is a group of words that contain a subject and a verb. Very good. So now you know what a clause is. So let's get back to the 4 structures of a sentence. On your charts, which I know you've started memorizing or copying, good job, keep it up, keep doing it until we meet on Tuesday, okay? So let's talk about the 4 structures. Now, for the 4 structures, on your chart, you should have seen a simple structure. What in the world is a simple structure? Now, a simple structure consists of one independent clause. Remember that word clause? One independent clause. And it expresses a complete thought. Now, you do remember me drawing houses in class. There was a reason behind the houses. Let me explain. When you think of a structure, most people think of a building, a house, a school. That would be an example of a structure. In sentences, as it pertains to structure, I'm going to use the house as an example. For a simple structure, we would draw something that resembled this. One building with a roof. We'd put some windows because we need to see, and we would place a door. Now I'm going to call this house as one building that's standing on its own, which means it's independent. Nothing is holding up this building. It's built nice, firm, and strong. And it is complete. There's nothing missing with my house. It's just very simple. But it has its roof, it has a foundation, it has its door, it has its windows. This is what we call a simple structure. Now I said I'm using a house, but a simple sentence would be one independent clause, which means one group of words that contain a subject and a verb. So I'll use Jesus wept as my example here. So it's a very simple sentence. It's an independent clause, which means it's standing on its own, and it expresses a complete thought. Jesus wept is a complete thought. Now, on your charts, you should also see a compound structure. What exactly is my compound structure? A compound sentence contains two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. What? A coordinating who? We're about to explain. So a compound structure contains two independent clauses, and it's joined by a coordinating conjunction. What does that mean? Again, I'm going to use my houses. It would be two independent structures. So how many houses should I draw? Two, because there are two. So I'm going to draw two right here. And it's joined by what is called a coordinating conjunction, which would be a bridge from here to here. So these coordinating conjunctions are called fanboys. And the F is for, A is for and, N is for nor, B is for but, O is for or, Y is for yet, and S is for so. So this is a quick way to remember your coordinating conjunctions. Just remember the fanboy. So if you live next door to your best friend, you have a little bridge that goes across, and as you're crossing over the bridge, there's some boys that stand there cheering you on. They're your fanboys. Right? So you go from one to the next. So how does that relate to a complete sentence? So I used Jesus wept. So this would be my one independent clause. And it's independent, it's standing there, it's nice and strong and firm, nothing is holding it up. And then over here, I could create another independent clause. So I could say, he loves me. He loves me. And then I could use one of my fanboys to connect this sentence with this one. So I could say, Jesus wept and he loves me. And you always put a comma. Jesus wept and he loves me. Or I could say, Jesus wept, yet he loves me. Or I could say, Jesus wept, so he loves me. The whole point is for you to be able to identify a compound sentence. So a compound sentence exists when you have two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. So I'm going to allow you to digest that. Now I'm going to erase this. And then our next structure is the complex structure. So I'm going to write complex. What exactly is a complex structure? According to the definition, a complex sentence consists of one independent clause. There's that word clause again, one independent clause, and at least one subordinate clause. So this is where you'll see why I'm using a house. So remember we talked about an independent clause being a house that was able to stand on its own. Independent means you're not depending on anyone or anything. So this house is independent. It's firm, it's solid, it's standing on its own. But then it contains at least one subordinate clause. What is this subordinate clause? This subordinate clause is an attachment to my house, which means that that portion of my house is not independent. It is leaning on the independent portion. So this could be called my dependent clause. And this is my independent clause. And this is what we call a subordinate clause. Subordinate. And don't worry, we'll go into more depth this year as to what this means. For now, I wanted to give you a quick overview of what these terms meant as you're reading your guide, okay? So we have our independent clause and our dependent clause. What does that look like as it pertains to a sentence? Let's go back to Jesus wept. So Jesus wept could be written as Jesus. The dependent portion would be who loves me wept. Now, if you notice, I just stopped this in the middle. I put who loves me. Who loves me cannot stand on its own. If I said who loves me, you would probably stand there and look at me waiting for me to finish my statement. Because you'd say, huh? Okay, there has to be more to what you're saying. So this part is my dependent clause. It's not standing on its own, and it's waiting on Jesus to help to define this part of the sentence. So Jesus, who loves me, so who loves me is defining Jesus, and we say he wept. Okay? Quick overview, nothing in depth, just an idea for you to be able, so when you see it, as we're going through, you've seen it before. All right, so our next structure is our compound complex. So let's look at our compound complex. Compound complex, by definition, means it consists of at least two, so it could be more, but at least two independent clauses So at least two independent clause consists of at least two independent clauses and at least one subordinate clause. So we spoke about two independent clauses before as it relates to a compound. And you're going to continue on that trend. So I'm going to build a compound or draw a compound house to give you a visual of what that would look like. Again, it's those two independent structures standing side by side, joined by my fanboy. Use a different color for the fanboy. Fanboys. And then we have a subordinate clause hanging out on one of the structures. And that is my subordinate clause. So let's see if we can create a sentence using two independent clauses and one subordinate clause. So the example they have here is Jesus who sang wept, yet he laughed. So here we have Jesus who sang, wept, yet he laughed. Now there's a trick to use with your fanboys. You should be able to pull this portion out of the sentence, and the sentence should still be able to stand. Kind of like these houses. If I removed my subordinate clause or my dependent clause from hanging on to this house should still stand firm. Remember, this is the portion that's dependent on the independent clause. Same thing here. So if I cover Jesus, the who sang portion, I should have Jesus wept, yet he laughed. And the sentence would be solid and firm. So this is an example of the compound complex. Now let's continue. We also need to speak about our purposes of a sentence. And if you needed to write something down, just pause the video, write it quickly, and then you can continue playing. That's the good thing about videos. In class, you have to be writing quickly, but here you can pause, hit play. Wonderful idea. Anyway, let's continue with our purpose. So we're going to speak now about declarative. What is a declarative? So they're using Jesus wept, so I'm going to keep going with Jesus wept. So Jesus wept is my example here. Now, as it pertains to the purpose of a sentence is the intent or function of the sentence, and each sentence has four possible purposes or functions. And the first one I'm going to explore is declarative. What is a declarative? A declarative sentence makes a statement. So I'm going to do declarative here. And we say declarative makes a statement. Now, a declarative sentence ends with a period. That's the end mark. So it ends with a period. So Jesus wept, and that is the distinguishing factor for your purposes. Your purposes are usually defined by the end mark. So Jesus wept is a statement, so we put an end mark, which is a period. Now, what about the exclamatory? So let's do an exclamatory. I'm going to use the same sentence. Jesus wept. What is the definition of an exclamatory? An exclamatory expresses strong emotion. And it ends with an exclamation mark. So with my declarative, I would say, Jesus wept. But with my exclamatory, I would say, Jesus wept! Yes, I'm expressing with strong emotion. Okay? So now we're going to go into our interrogative. Now, as you think about interrogative, think about interrogation. When someone is arrested or they're in trouble, they're usually interrogated. They're being asked questions. So where were you? What did you do the day of the crime? Were you at home or were you at church? What exactly is your intent of standing here, sir? Those are interrogative questions. So what is an interrogative? So let's continue with Jesus wept. Now with my interrogative, we say it is a sentence that asks a question. And of course, it ends with a question mark. Jesus wept? Yeah, he did. So, interrogative, we're asking. The defining factor is my end mark. Jesus wept? Yes, he did. We just asked a question. And then lastly, we have our imperative. What is our imperative? Now this one is different because with our imperative, it expresses a command and it ends with a period or an exclamation mark. So I could say, I would have to change the verb if I kept Jesus wept. I would have to say something like, Jesus weep. But for the purpose of this example in week 1, they have weep. With a strong, we're expressing a command. We're telling Jesus, weep. Hopefully we won't tell Jesus to weep. But that is an example of an imperative. Weep. And as we go along, we're going to find out that there is a subject, a hidden subject here, and we call that subject an implied you. Because we are speaking to someone, and that person would be Jesus, and we're looking at him, and we're saying weep, and we're speaking to him, which would be an implied you. Okay? So this is just a quick overview of what we missed We also spoke about the 7 patterns, and I did go in depth with the 7 patterns and the different combinations. There are 112 different sentences that you will experience for your life, in your entire life. And there are only 112 different ways to express a correct sentence. Take your notes, and if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to call me, email me, text me, whatever you need to. But we're going to go in depth for the next 24 weeks of everything I just covered here. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and, oh my goodness, am I supposed to know all of this by next week? No. This is just an introduction of it's a preview of what is to come. So thank you for watching my video. Not my forte, but hopefully you got something from it, and I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.